The February wind cut through my cheap coat like a blade as I shoved through the doors of Nocturne, already 12 minutes late. My fingers were stiff with cold, my carefully pinned hair coming loose in dark strands that stuck to my lip gloss. I couldn't afford another write-up. Stella. Vincent, the floor manager, caught my elbow before I made it past the host stand. His grip was tight, his usual composure cracked. "You're on the private room tonight." My stomach dropped. "That's not my section." "It is now." His eyes darted toward the back hallway. "Mr. Keldron is dining with guests. These people don't tolerate mistakes." Polite. Efficient. Forgettable.
Got it.
I nodded, though my hands shook as I tied my apron. 6 months ago, I'd fled Boston with one suitcase and a maxed-out credit card, running from something I still couldn't name. New York was supposed to be my invisibility. But invisibility required rent money, and Nocturne paid better than anywhere else, probably because they only opened after sunset and asked no questions about the clientele who never seemed to eat. I'd worked at Nocturne for 2 months and had never seen the owner. No one had. Just his name whispered like a prayer or a curse. The main dining room glowed with amber light, all dark wood and crystal stemware, the kind of wealth that didn't need to prove itself. I moved through it with practiced invisibility, spine straight, eyes down until I reached the heavy door at the end of the corridor. I knocked once. Entered. The private room was dim, lit only by candles that threw long shadows across white tablecloths. 6 figures sat around the table, all in black, all impossibly still. Their conversation died the moment I stepped inside. And then I saw him. He sat at the center, though the table was round. Ice-pale hair pulled back in a half-knot, sharp cheekbones shadowed in gold. A black velvet jacket that fit him like a second skin. But it was his eyes that stopped me, silver, cold, ancient. They locked onto mine and held. I looked away immediately, pulse hammering. "Good evening. I'm Stella, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start with drinks?" I moved around the table, noting their orders with a steady hand I didn't feel. They were all beautiful, all watching me. None of them smiled. When I reached him, he didn't answer right away. "You're new," he said. His voice was silk over stone. "Yes, sir. 2 months. His gaze traced my face like he was memorizing it. "Whiskey."
Neat.
I nodded and turned to leave, but my phone buzzed in my apron. I never kept it on during shifts, except for the past 3 days. Yaya's nurse had my number. Hospice care didn't wait for convenient moments. I delivered the drinks in silence, hyper-aware of the way the room seemed to hold its breath. As I set the whiskey before him, my phone vibrated again. I glanced at the screen. The nurse. My chest tightened. I stepped back toward the door and answered without thinking.
"Nye."
I whispered. The nurse's voice was soft, apologetic.
Greek.
Distikos Stella Legays Mears.
Days.
My grandmother had days left. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone until my knuckles went white. Efcharisto. The Eartho. "Thank you. I will come." I hung up. When I opened my eyes, the room was silent. Every face had turned toward me.
Pale.
Unblinking.
Predatory.
And at the center of it all, he leaned forward, resting his chin on one hand, silver eyes gleaming with something I didn't understand. For the first time since I'd entered, his lips curved. It wasn't a smile. It was a claim. Vincent found me in the kitchen at 2 a.m., elbow deep in soapy water, scrubbing wine glasses that cost more than my rent. "Mr. Keldron wants to see you." The glass nearly slipped from my hands.
Now.
His office. Top floor. Vincent's face was unreadable, but his eyes held something like pity. "Don't keep him waiting." The elevator to the 6th floor required a key. Vincent used his, pressed the button, then stepped back without a word. The doors closed, sealing me in silence broken only by the hum of cables pulling me upward. The hallway at the top was narrow, lit by sconces that flickered like real flame. One door at the end. Dark wood. No nameplate. I knocked. Enter. His voice carried through the wood like a physical thing. The office was vast and dim, lit only by candles scattered across surfaces. The desk, the bookshelf, the marble mantel. Shadows pooled in corners. I noticed immediately no windows. No mirrors. Ivrik Keldrin stood behind his desk, hands clasped behind his back, silhouetted against the far wall. He'd removed his jacket. His white shirt gleamed in the candlelight, sleeves rolled to his forearms. Sit, Stella. I sat in the leather chair facing his desk, my apron still tied at my waist, my hands folded to hide their trembling. He moved around the desk with liquid grace and settled across from me, silver eyes reflecting candlelight like a cat's. You speak Greek, he said. Not a question. Yes, sir. My grandmother raised me in Astoria. Fluently. I nodded. He opened a drawer and withdrew an envelope, slid it across the polished surface. First-class ticket to Athens. Departing tomorrow night. Return open. I stared at the envelope like it might bite. I don't understand. I have business in Greece. Delicate business. I require a translator I can trust. He leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. 3 weeks. You'll accompany me, translate as needed, and in return, he produced a second envelope, thicker. $10,000.
Cash.
Plus full coverage of your grandmother's medical expenses. Experimental treatment. Swiss specialist. Already arranged. My breath caught. How do you? I make it my business to know. His tone was matter-of-fact. Do we have an agreement? I can't just leave. My job, my apartment. Your job will be here when you return. Your rent will be paid. He tilted his head. Is there another obstacle? I don't know you. Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe. He reached into the drawer again. This time, he slid a photograph across the desk. My apartment building. The cracked steps. The faded number above the door. Then another. My subway platform. The exact corner where I waited every morning. He didn't say a word.
Didn't need to.
I looked up and met those silver eyes. When do we leave? I whispered. His smile was slow. Satisfied. 11 p.m. A car will collect you at 10. The black car arrived at 9:58 p.m., idling outside my building like a sleek predator. The driver didn't speak, didn't help with my single battered suitcase. He simply opened the door and waited. Teterboro Airport was quiet at this hour. Private jets lined up like sleeping birds. Ours sat at the end of the tarmac, smaller than I'd expected, but gleaming white under the floodlights. The stairs were already down. Ivrik stood at the top, dressed entirely in black, slacks, shirt, long coat that moved like water in the wind. He watched me climb toward him with that same unreadable expression from his office.
Punctual, he said.
Good. The cabin interior stole my breath. Cream leather seats, polished wood panels, soft blue lighting along the floor that made everything feel submerged, underwater, like stepping into a dream or a trap. Sit anywhere, Ivrik said, moving past me toward the back. We'll be airborne shortly. I chose a seat near the window and buckled in, my suitcase stowed by a flight attendant who appeared and vanished without a word. The engines hummed to life. Ivrik settled across the aisle, already opening a leather-bound book that looked older than the plane itself. We took off at exactly 11 p.m. The city dropped away beneath us, a glittering sprawl swallowed by darkness. I watched until there was nothing but black, then turned back to the cabin. Ivrik hadn't moved. The book in his hands was filled with symbols I didn't recognize, not Greek, not anything I'd ever seen. His eyes tracked across the page with perfect focus, never blinking, never tiring. The flight attendant brought me sparkling water and a plate of fruit and cheese. I realized I was starving. I ate slowly, watching Ivrik from the corner of my eye. He didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't even glance at the attendant when she asked if he needed anything. Hours passed. My eyes grew heavy. I reached for the blanket folded on the seat beside me and found something else underneath. A manila folder, unmarked. I glanced at Ivrik. He turned a page, unbothered. I opened the folder. My breath stopped. Photographs. Documents. Records dating back years. My childhood apartment in Astoria. My mother's obituary from when I was 9. My scattered college transcripts. Employment history. Address history. And then, further down, police reports I'd never filed. Incident reports that shouldn't exist.
Boston.
6 months ago. The night I ran. There were photographs of him. My ex. Details I'd never told anyone. Notes in precise handwriting documenting his escalation, his obsession. The night I'd woken to find him standing over my bed with a knife and eyes that couldn't be human. The night I'd grabbed my purse and ran and never looked back. I looked up, hands shaking, and found Ivrik watching me now. His book closed. His silver eyes calm. "You survived something you shouldn't have," he said quietly. "That makes you interesting. You had no right. I had every right." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't hire blindly, Stella. And I don't take chances. Not with what's waiting in Athens." "What is waiting in Athens?" His smile was cold. "People who would very much like to know what you know, what you've seen, what you might remember." "I don't know anything." "No," he agreed. "But you will." We landed as the sun rose over Athens, painting the Aegean gold and rose. I'd barely slept. Ivrik looked exactly as he had 12 hours ago, flawless, unruffled, as if exhaustion was a concept that didn't apply to him. The drive took us out of the city, winding up into the hills where olive groves gave way to rocky cliffs and the sea crashed far below. The estate appeared suddenly around a curve, rising from the stone like it had grown there. It was ancient. Marble columns flanked the entrance, weathered by centuries, but still standing. Frescoes covered the walls, faded images of gods and monsters locked in eternal battle. Medusa's serpents, Poseidon's trident, the Minotaur's maze. "How old is this place?" I whispered as we passed beneath an archway carved with symbols I almost recognized. "Old enough," Ivrik said. Inside, the air was cool and still, carrying the scent of stone and something else, incense, maybe, or very old wood. Our footsteps echoed across marble floors inlaid with mosaics that had lost half their tiles to time. A woman in black appeared, silent as a shadow, and gestured for me to follow. I glanced back at Ivrik.
"Go," he said.
"Settle in. I'll send for you this evening." My room was on the second floor, overlooking the cliffs. It was larger than my entire apartment in Queens. A 4-poster bed draped in white linen, French doors opening onto a balcony, and against the far wall, an enormous wardrobe stood open, revealing gowns in emerald silk and deep crimson velvet, flowing fabrics that belonged in another century. I ran my fingers over the nearest dress, and the woman in black spoke for the first time. "For dinner," she said in accented English. "Mr. Keldron insists." Then she was gone. I stood there, surrounded by luxury I hadn't earned, wearing jeans and a wrinkled sweater, and felt the trap close tighter. Ivrik found me on the balcony an hour later. I'd showered, changed into clean clothes from my suitcase, but couldn't bring myself to touch the gowns yet. "Your grandmother is comfortable," he said without preamble. I spun around. What? Dr. Brunner arrived from Zurich this morning. He's with her now at the hospice facility in Athens. Experimental gene therapy. Expensive, but effective. He stepped closer, hands in his pockets. "She'll be moved here tomorrow. Better care. Better chances." My throat tightened. "I can't pay for that. Any of that." "I know. So, what do you want from me?" He studied me with those silver eyes, and for a moment I saw something flicker there, something almost human. "Your loyalty," he said finally. "Your silence. Your trust. That's all. That's everything." He moved to the balcony railing, looking out over the sea. "Debts are binding, Stella. Sacred, even. I've given you your grandmother's life. What you give me in return will be decided in time. That's not a bargain. That's a chain." He turned back, and his smile was sharp as broken glass. "Yes," he said simply. "It is." The woman in black returned at sunset, laying out the emerald gown with wordless insistence. I dressed slowly, my hands clumsy with the unfamiliar fabric. The silk clung to my curves, the neckline lower than anything I'd ever worn. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Ivrik was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, dressed in a black suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a painting. His eyes traveled over me once, slowly, and something shifted in his expression. "Perfect," he murmured. He offered his arm. I took it, feeling the cold of his skin through the fabric. The dining room was vast, lit by hundreds of candles and iron chandeliers that hung from vaulted ceilings. A long table dominated the center, already surrounded by guests. They were all beautiful, inhumanly so. Pale skin, sharp features, eyes that caught the candlelight and threw it back like mirrors. They wore black and deep jewel tones, and when they turned to watch us enter, I felt like prey walking into a den of wolves. Ivrik guided me to a seat at his right hand. I sat, spine straight, hands folded in my lap, and tried not to stare. The woman across from me smiled, showing teeth too white, too perfect. "So this is your new acquisition, Ivrik." "Translator," he corrected, his tone mild but edged. "Stella, this is Adriana. She manages my interests in Prague." Adriana's smile widened. She didn't blink. The others introduced themselves in turn, names I struggled to remember, cities scattered across Europe and beyond. They spoke in cultured tones, but underneath I heard something else. Amusement, curiosity, hunger. Dinner was served, course after course of food I could barely taste. I noticed that while I ate, the others merely moved their plates around, glasses of wine untouched, conversations flowing around me in English, French, languages I didn't know. Then the doors opened. The temperature in the room dropped. Every head turned. A man entered, flanked by 3 others, all in charcoal gray that stood out against the sea of black. He was tall, dark-haired, with a face like a Roman statue and eyes the color of old blood. "Constantine," Ivrik said, his voice flat. "You weren't invited. And yet here I am." Constantine Velos moved to the table with easy confidence, claiming an empty seat halfway down. His companions remained standing behind him, silent sentinels. "I heard you'd return to Athens. Thought I'd pay my respects." How considerate. The air crackled with tension. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. Constantine's gaze found me. "And who is this?" "She smells mortal." "My translator," Ivrik said. "How practical." Constantine leaned back, fingers steepled. Tell me, does she understand our concern about the southern sanctuaries? The conversation shifted then, flowing into rapid formal Greek, the kind used in courts and old contracts. Constantine and Adriana led the exchange, voices quick and layered with double meanings. I caught fragments, territorial disputes, old grievances, veiled threats. And then Constantine said it, his tone casual. To imatino decatumo stin nea seleni. The blood tithe at the new moon. My breath caught. I leaned closer to Ivrik, my voice barely a whisper. He's talking about a blood tithe. New moon. 3 days from now. Ivarik's expression didn't change. Didn't even flicker. But under the table, his hand found mine. Cold fingers wrapping around my warm ones, steady and firm. A silent thank you. The dinner ended near midnight. Constantine left with poisoned smiles and promises to see each other soon. When the last guest departed, Ivrik turned to me. Walk with me. We moved through silent corridors to a room I hadn't seen, a private study lined with artifacts behind glass. He stopped before a velvet box on the desk. You did well tonight, he said, opening it. Inside lay a necklace. Ancient gold, serpentine and delicate, with a stone at its center that seemed to hold its own light. It belonged to my mother, Ivrik said quietly. Over 900 years ago, before I became what I am. He lifted it from the box and stepped behind me. I felt the cold metal settle against my throat, his fingers brushing my neck as he fastened the clasp. You're not just a translator anymore, Stella, he murmured against my ear. You're under my protection. And that means you're a target. What are you? I whispered. His smile was sad. Ancient. You already know. The hospice facility occupied a restored mansion in the heart of Athens, all white stone and iron balconies overlooking gardens that bloomed impossibly lush. Dr. Brunner met me in the lobby, a tall, thin man with pale eyes and an accent that matched his Swiss precision. Your grandmother is responding well to treatment, he said, leading me down a hushed corridor. Her lucidity has improved significantly. But I must warn you, she's been asking for you. Insistently. Almost urgently. He stopped outside a door marked 47. I'll give you privacy. Yaya sat propped against pillows, looking smaller than I remembered, but more alert than she'd been in months. Her hair, white as snow, had been braided carefully. Her eyes, dark and sharp, found me the instant I entered. Stalaki, she breathed. I crossed the room and took her hand, pressing it to my cheek. I'm here, Yaya. I'm here. She cupped my face with trembling fingers, searching my features like she was memorizing them. Then her gaze dropped to my throat, to the necklace. Her entire body went rigid. The color drained from her face. Oki, she whispered.
No.
Oki, Oki, Oki. Yaya, what's wrong? Her grip on my wrist turned iron strong, yanking me closer with a strength that shouldn't have been possible. Po Tuvrikes? Where did you find it? It was a gift. From my employer, Keldrin. She spat the name like a curse. Her eyes, wild now, locked onto mine. You were the serpent's mark. Tafiti, just like your grandfather. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? She pulled me down until our faces were inches apart, her breath rapid and shallow. Your pappus, he served them. The Keldrin line. For 40 years, he gave his blood so they could walk in twilight. So they could move in the hours between dark and light without burning. Her voice broke. He died in their service. And I swore, I would never let them take another. The room tilted. I gripped the bed rail to steady myself. That's not possible. That's... Semina? Lies. She laughed bitterly. You think your gift for languages came from nowhere? You think you survived what you survived in Boston by luck. Her fingers dug into my wrist. We carry their protection in our blood, Stella. But protection is just another word for chains. Yaya, please. You were always meant to return to them. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. I tried to hide you, kept you away from Greece, away from the old families.
But they found you anyway.
They always find us. I sank into the chair beside her bed, my legs unable to hold me. How long? How long has our family? Generations. Her voice was hollow. Since the Keldron Lord saved your great-great-grandfather from the Ottoman purge. A blood debt. Sacred and binding. We serve. They protect. The contract never expires. I touched the necklace at my throat, and it suddenly felt like a collar. Did my mother know? Yaya's face crumpled. She tried to break free. Married an American, moved across the ocean, gave you a new life. Her grip tightened. And then she died young. Unexpectedly. They don't let us leave, Karitsi Mao. They never let us leave. The implications crashed over me like a wave. My mother's sudden death when I was 9. My grandfather I'd never met. The way Ivrik had known everything about me, tracked my movements, appeared in my life exactly when I was most desperate. It wasn't chance, I whispered. He didn't just find me. He was waiting.
He owns you, Yaya said.
Just like he owned your grandfather. Just like he would have owned your mother if she'd lived. She pulled me close, pressing her forehead to mine. But you can still run, Stalaki. Before the binding is complete. Before. The door opened. Ivrik stood in the threshold, perfectly still, his silver eyes moving from Yaya to me. I see, he said quietly, that introductions have been made. Yaya's hand fell away from mine. Her face went slack with recognition, with fear, with surrender. Kyrie Keldron, she whispered. He inclined his head. Eleni, it's been a long time. And I understood, with horrible clarity, that my grandmother had met him before. Decades ago. When he'd looked exactly as he did now. I didn't speak to Ivrik on the drive back to the estate. Didn't look at him. My grandmother's words echoed in my head like a death knell. They never let us leave. Tomorrow night, Ivrik said as we pulled through the gates, there's something I want to show you. I finally turned to face him. I want to go home. No, he said simply. You don't. He was right. I hated that he was right. The next evening, a different dress waited in my room. Midnight blue silk that pooled like water. The woman in black did my hair, twisting it up with pins that felt like they cost more than I was worth. Ivrik met me in the foyer, wearing charcoal gray, his pale hair loose around his shoulders. He looked like something from a Renaissance painting. Where are we going? I asked. The National Archaeological Museum. Private showing. He offered his arm. Consider it an apology. For lying to me? For not lying better. The museum stood dark and imposing against the Athens skyline, closed to the public for hours. But the doors opened at our approach, a curator in a black suit bowing deeply to Ivrik before disappearing into the shadows. Inside, the galleries stretched empty and vast, lit only by strategic spotlights on artifacts that had survived millennia. Mycenaean gold. Cycladic figures. Bronze shields pitted with age. Beautiful, isn't it? Ivrik moved through the space like he owned it, or like he remembered when these objects had been new. Humanity's desperate attempt at immortality. Creating things that outlast the flesh. I stopped before a case containing ancient jewelry. Gold serpents twisted around lapis lazuli, remarkably similar to the necklace at my throat. How old are you? I asked quietly. Old enough to have commissioned pieces like these. I turned to study my reflection in the glass, the blue dress, my upswept hair, the necklace gleaming at my throat. But where Ivrik stood beside me, there was nothing. Empty space. My heart stopped. Stella. His voice came from behind me now, though I hadn't heard him move. Don't. You don't have a reflection.
No.
I spun around, and he was closer than before, silver eyes watching me with something like regret. The truth I'd been avoiding crashed over me like a wave, undeniable now. Before either of us could speak, footsteps echoed through the gallery. Multiple sets, moving with predatory synchronization. Constantine Velos emerged from the shadows, flanked by the same 3 companions from the dinner. They spread out, forming a loose semicircle. Ivrik, Constantine said pleasantly. What a coincidence. There are no coincidences with you. Ivrik shifted slightly, placing himself between Constantine and me. Constantine's gaze slid past him, finding me, and the little anchor. How are you enjoying Athens? Don't speak to her, Ivrik said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Why not? She should know what she is to you. Constantine took a step closer, and I noticed, in the glass behind him, nothing. No reflection of him or his companions. Just empty museum floor. You're waning, old friend. Your power stretched too thin across too many territories. But she can fix that, can't she? Anchor you. Stabilize what's crumbling. That's enough. Her bloodline was bred for it. Centuries of careful selection. She's not a translator, Kuritsi. His smile was cruel. She's a battery. I stumbled backward, and Ivrik moved, faster than sight, suddenly between us with his hand on Constantine's chest.
Leave. Now.
The air crackled with tension. Constantine's companions shifted forward, and I saw their eyes gleam red in the spotlight. Then alarms. Piercing and sudden, shrieking through the museum. Constantine's smile widened. Pity. We were just getting reacquainted. He melted back into the shadows with his coven, gone as quickly as they'd appeared. Ivrik grabbed my hand, his grip ice-cold. We need to go. Now. We ran through galleries of silent gods and broken heroes, my heels clicking against marble as alarms wailed. Security lights blazed to life. Doors slammed somewhere behind us. We burst into the Athens night, and Ivrik pulled me into an alley, pressing me against ancient stone as footsteps thundered past. His body was cold against mine. Solid.
Real.
I'm a tool to you, I whispered. That's all I've ever been. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes, and for the first time, I saw something raw there. If that were true, he said quietly, I would have compelled you the moment we met. But I can't. Your blood won't allow it. So instead, I have to hope you'll choose to stay. We fled Athens before dawn touched the horizon. Ivaric's reach was vast. Within 2 hours, Yaya had been moved from the hospice to a waiting yacht, settled into a medical suite that looked more like a luxury hotel room than a ship's cabin. Dr. Brunner accompanied her, silent and efficient, asking no questions about our sudden departure. By the time the sun rose, we were far from the mainland, cutting through the Aegean like a knife through silk. I stood at the railing as night fell again, wrapped in a thick coat that did nothing to stop the shivering. The wind pulled at my hair, salt spray misting my face. Behind me, the Nephilim cut a white wake through black water. You haven't slept. Ivaric's voice came from behind me, soft as the wind. Neither have you. I don't need to. I turned to face him. He stood in the shadows beyond the deck lights, hands in the pockets of his long coat, pale hair moving like water in the breeze. Tell me the truth. All of it. He was quiet for a long moment, looking past me to the dark silhouette of islands rising from the sea. Then he moved to the railing beside me, close enough that I could feel the cold radiating from his skin. I was born in 987, he said quietly, in what is now northern Greece, though the borders were different then. I died in 1015, and I have been walking this earth ever since. Over 1,000 years. The number was incomprehensible. The first bloodline, he continued, was not a curse or a plague. It was a choice. A ritual performed by those who refused to surrender to time. We traded warmth for eternity, reflection for power. He glanced at me. But eternity has a cost. Without an anchor to the living world, we lose ourselves. We become the monsters from the stories. An anchor, I repeated. Me. Your bloodline is rare, ancient. Your blood carries an immunity that makes you invisible to compulsion. I cannot bend your will, cannot make you see me as anything other than what I am. His silver eyes found mine. Do you understand what that means? In 1,000 years, I have never met anyone I couldn't control.
Until you.
The weight of it settled over me like a shroud. So you do need me? Yes. No hesitation. No charm. Just truth.
Constantine was right.
My power is stretched thin across too many territories, too many centuries. Without you, I will fade. Become something even I would not recognize. Then why didn't you just compel me? Force me to stay? Because I can't. Frustration crept into his voice. Your blood won't allow it. So instead, I had a hope. He stopped, jaw tightening. I intended to pay you after the council meeting. Give you enough money to disappear anywhere in the world. I told myself I could be disciplined enough to let you go. What changed? He turned fully toward me, and in the moonlight, he looked almost human, almost vulnerable. The way you whispered that translation to me at dinner. The way you didn't flinch when Constantine threatened you. The way you looked at me in the museum when you realized what I was, not with fear, but with understanding. He stepped closer. You are my weakness, Stella. The only person in a millennium who can truly hurt me. And you are my salvation, because you are the only one who can keep me from becoming a monster. On the horizon, white buildings began to emerge from the darkness, clinging to red volcanic cliffs that plunged into the sea. The fortress of Santorini, ancient and warded, carved into stone older than Christianity itself. I can't be just a tool, I whispered. I don't want a tool. His hand rose, cold fingers brushing my cheek. I want someone who chooses to stay, not because they have to, but because they want to. The yacht turned toward the Crescent Bay, and I realized with startling clarity that I was tired of running, tired of being invisible. For the first time in my life, someone saw me, all of me, and he was asking me to stay. The fortress clung to the cliffs like it had grown from the rock itself. White stone walls sank into the red volcanic face, terraces stepping down toward the Aegean, where the sea crashed far below in endless, rhythmic fury. Days blurred together there. The sky was always impossibly blue, the sun too bright, the nights too clear. Sigils I didn't recognize were carved into the stone, circles within circles, spirals and serpents and eyes, worn smooth by centuries of wind. The woman in black told me they were older than the churches, older than any written record. Wards, Ivrik had said. Protection. Yaya's room opened onto a small balcony of her own. I spent hours there, sitting beside her as she watched the water, her breathing easier now, her color returning under Dr. Brunner's care. He looks the same, she murmured once, the wind threading through her words. Not a day older than when your Pappas first knelt to him. I swallowed. Do you hate him? She took a long time to answer. I am afraid of him, she said at last. But I'm more afraid of what hunts him. Men like Constantine do not stop at lines drawn on maps. They cross oceans. Her faded eyes met mine. You cannot stay between worlds forever, Stalaki. The sea does not let you stand in the middle. You swim or you drown. That night, Ivrik sent for me. He waited on the highest terrace, where the stone dropped sheer into black water, and the stars seemed close enough to touch. The wind tugged at his pale hair, at the edges of his dark coat, but he stood perfectly still, a statue brought to life. When I joined him at the low wall, he didn't speak at first. We just stood there, listening to the sea batter the cliffs. Your grandmother will be cared for, he said finally, for as long as she lives. Whether you stay or go, that is not negotiable. The debt for her life is already mine, not yours. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. So this isn't about her.
No.
He turned, leaning back against the stone so he could study my face. This is about you. He reached into his coat and placed a slim envelope on the wall between us. There is a ticket inside. New York. New identity should you wish it. An account with enough money that you will never scrub dishes in the back of a restaurant again. The envelope sat there like a guillotine. If you take it, he said, I will let you go. No one will follow. The Keldron line will release its claim on your blood. You may live out your mortal life however you choose. Invisible, if that is what you still want. And if I stay? My voice came out quieter than I intended. His gaze held mine, silver eyes reflecting starlight. If you stay, you will bind yourself to my world.
To me.
There will be no going back. You will be my consort, my anchor, my equal. He paused, letting the weight of it settle. You will live longer than any human has a right to, he continued. Your senses will sharpen. Your body will change slowly. You will walk in places sunlight fears to touch. And you will be hunted by those who want what you are, what you mean to me. It sounds like trading one cage for another, I said. It can be, he admitted. If you let it. If I let it. But there is one thing I can never take from you, Stella. He lifted his hand, not quite touching my cheek. Your choice. I cannot compel you. I cannot force you to love me or stay with me or see me as anything but what I am. The Aegean stretched out below us, black and endless. Behind me lay the life I'd been running from. Ahead of me, the life I'd been bred for without my consent. Somewhere in the middle stood the man who had turned my fate into an offer. I thought of Boston, of waking to a shadow over my bed and eyes that weren't human, of grabbing my purse and running, always running. I thought of Nocturne, of pretending I was invisible while a room full of predators watched me breathe. I thought of Ivrik in a museum, stepping between me and Constantine without hesitation. Of the way his hand had found mine under the table when I whispered the translation that might have saved his throne. For the first time in years, I said slowly, I don't want to run. His eyes flashed, something fragile and fierce breaking through the ancient calm. I looked down at the envelope, at the life I could have, small, safe, forgettable. Then I pushed it back toward him, and I reached for his hand, the cold one, the one that had ended lives and signed treaties and carried the weight of a millennium, and laced my fingers through his. I'm choosing you, I said. I'm choosing this. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Even the sea seemed to hold its breath. Then Ivrik pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine, his eyes closed. Then from this night forward, he whispered, you are mine, and I am yours. Yaya passed 3 weeks after I made my choice, slipping away in the quiet hours before dawn. I was holding her hand when her breathing slowed, then stopped. Her last words were in Greek, whispered so softly I had to lean close to hear them. I steleftheri Torah, Stalaki. I steleftheri. You are free now, little star. You are free. We buried her in the old cemetery on the eastern edge of the island, where gnarled olive trees stretched their branches over headstones so ancient the names had worn away. The priest spoke the old prayers, and I stood beside Ivrik in a black dress that moved like smoke, the serpent necklace cold against my throat. When the last handful of earth had been laid, Ivrik took my hand. She's at peace, he said quietly. I know. And I did. For the first time in her long life, Yaya had been free of fear, free of the weight of servitude. Thank you for giving her that. He squeezed my hand once, then led me back down the hillside toward the fortress that had become my home. 3 years later, I stood in a different place entirely. The grand hall of the Keldron estate in Vienna glittered with candlelight, hundreds of flames reflected in polished marble and crystal chandeliers. The court had gathered, representatives from every major bloodline in Europe, dressed in silks and velvets that cost more than small countries. And at the center of it all, I stood beside Ivrik. Gone was the waitress in the cheap coat, the girl who scrubbed wine glasses and kept her head down. The woman who looked back at me from the mirrored columns, because I still cast a reflection, even if he didn't, wore a gown of deep crimson that clung to curves I'd learned to carry with confidence. My dark hair fell in waves over bare shoulders, and at my throat, the serpent necklace gleamed like a crown. I was no longer invisible. The binding had changed me, not into what Ivrik was. I would never be fully that, but into something in between. My senses had sharpened until I could hear heartbeats from across a room, could smell fear like perfume. My strength had grown. My reflexes quickened. I aged, but slowly, as if time itself had decided I was worth savoring. And I was immune. Compulsion slid off me like water. Other powers, the kind that could shatter minds or stop hearts, found no purchase. I was the anchor, yes, but I was also the shield. Constantine Velos had learned that the hard way. His attempt to overthrow Ivrik had ended in a confrontation on the cliffs of Santorini, where the wards held strong and his coven had fractured under the weight of their own ambition. Ivrik had been merciful in the end, exile rather than execution. But Constantine's territory had been divided, his name struck from the councils. He would not trouble us again. You're thinking too loudly, Ivrik murmured beside me, his hand resting at the small of my back. I glanced up at him. In 3 years, he hadn't changed. Same pale hair, same silver eyes, same cold beauty that made mortals stumble over their own feet. But the way he looked at me had shifted. Where once there had been calculation, now there was something warmer. Something almost human. Devotion, I'd come to realize. Dangerous and absolute. I was just thinking, I said, about how far we've come from Nocturne. His smile was slow, private. Do you miss it? The invisibility. Not for a second. A murmur rippled through the hall as the final guests arrived, dignitaries from the Eastern bloodlines, come to pay their respects. To acknowledge what everyone already knew. I was no longer just a Varric's translator. No longer just his anchor. I was his consort. His queen. The Twilight Queen, they called me in whispers. Half mortal, half myth, and wholly feared. Ivrik raised his glass, and the hall fell silent. To old bonds, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly, and new alliances. The court echoed the toast, crystal chiming like bells. But Avaric's eyes never left mine as he brought the glass to his lips. And when he set it down, he took my hand and pressed a kiss to my knuckles, cold lips against warm skin, a gesture that had become our ritual. To you, Stella, he whispered, too low for anyone else to hear. My anchor, my equal, my only light in 1,000 years of darkness. I leaned close, letting my lips brush his ear. And you're mine, for as long as this world will have us. His fingers tightened around mine. Outside, the Vienna night stretched endlessly, filled with shadows and secrets and the weight of immortal politics. But here, in this glittering hall, with a Varric's cold hand in mine and a court that bowed when I passed, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a child. I felt like I belonged. And when the music began and Ivric led me onto the floor, the court parting like water, I didn't think about what I'd lost. I thought only about what I'd gained. Everything. If Stella's journey from invisible waitress to Twilight Queen moved you, don't let this story disappear into the shadows. Hit that like button, subscribe for more dark romance tales, and share this with someone who believes in choosing love over fear. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for being here.